All right, Mr. Fox here 2 more times. We've got Unit 9 that we are starting here today, and it's our last unit of the year, and it only has 2 lessons to it. So our study guide here is small, just 1 page front and back, and we're going to take care of the 9.1 page of it today, looking at resources from the sea. Our Unit 9 is dedicated to ocean and human interaction, so here we're going to be talking about the resources being taken, and in the next one we'll look at some of the other human interactions that take place with the ocean. And if we're talking about resources being taken from the sea, number 1 has to be seafood. So finfish and shellfish combine for most of what is being pulled out of the ocean in terms of food. There are some other things as well, but finfish is most of it, just fish. We talk about 90% of the worldwide harvest. And this worldwide, this is a pretty important industry, not just in terms of jobs and economics, but in terms of health and where people are going to get their proper nutrition. About 30% of the total animal protein intake around the world happens because of the seafood that we pull from the ocean. And there are some of these places around the world, quite a bit of that, in areas of the world where finding other sources of protein are going to be quite difficult. Fisheries, nothing that you have to write here, but a couple things that I want to note. 1950s to present, there has been a 5-fold increase in the fishing effort. I mean, more fishermen, more boats, more money being poured into it, 5 times as much fishing being done since the 50s. 1980s to present, the worldwide catch has stayed relatively constant. So that's despite the fact that there's a lot more energy and time and money being put into trying to catch these fish. The amount of fish being caught has not increased with that effort, which is not a good sign. That means that there are not as many fish to catch in the first place now. The demand for seafood and the expansion of the world's population have increased pressure on seafood resources. So by demand, we mean like some people in places around the world that typically didn't eat a whole lot of seafood, them having access because of quick transportation and freezing and that kind of thing allows the possibility for people to eat seafood in places of the world that didn't usually eat seafood. And then beyond that, just the explosion of the global population over the last 100 years has really put a strain on the seafood populations within the ocean that we pull out for food. Let's see. Keep on going here. All right, so we're moving into our second box here, major food species. We've got copioid fishes, which include sardines and herrings, a couple of others there as well. A number of different ways that these fish can be used. They are sometimes eaten directly, but a lot of this type of fish is going to be used in other ways too. So fish flour, fish meal, fish oil, there's a big market for that right now. So fish meal is one that I do want to mention real quick. This is stuff that is fish that gets ground down and then is being fed to feed other animals like cows and poultry and even other fish being used at fish farms. They'll catch these fish, grind them up, and feed them to the fish in the fish farm, make pellets and stuff out of it as a source of food, kind of like dog food for these other types of animals. In fact, it gets put in dog food and cat food as well. Okay, then we've got our cods, haddock, pollock, and whiting. These are going to be a traditionally vital source of protein in many parts of the world. They're fairly easy to catch, and then and that helps make them pretty inexpensive. They're not a favorite around the world, and we have easy access to them, so the price stays low. So people around the world have easy access to it. Cod fishery, we'll just quick note about this real quick. The fishery peaked in the 60s, and then already in the 60s, this cod fishery began to decline. The closure of this fishery caused a high unemployment rate for American and Canadian fishermen who had been highly involved in that industry. We don't know for sure yet if that will ever fully recover. It was hit very, very hard. It was significantly overfished. So within the Grand Banks area, the cod still remains listed as endangered. All right, and then we've got jacks, mullet, rockfish, mackerel. They're important in terms of the worldwide tonnage of just we can get our hands on a lot of these. Things like canned mackerel can be pretty important in some places in the world. We have tuna. This part we are writing here. We do want you to know for tuna that they are caught in open water, they command high prices, and that they're often caught on long lines or in gill nets. So there are some question marks about how sustainable of a fishing tactic this is, or how harmful it is in some other ways. Mollusks, now we move away momentarily from fish, so we do pull some other stuff from the ocean as well. So some of our mollusks include clams, oysters, mussels, scallops. These are all pretty important worldwide. In a number of different places around the world, you can find people eating these. And then from there you have your crustaceans. This is going to include our shrimp, lobster, crab. Again, I'm kind of trying to fly through this a little bit, so pause me if I go too quickly. These are worldwide. They are prized and command a high price as well, so a lot goes into trying to catch these big three here for our crustaceans. And then a couple of other things too. It includes seaweed, jellyfish, sea urchins, none of which are particularly popular here, but in places like Japan, there are a handful of places where those couple of things can be pretty popular. And then you have sea turtles in some places around the world too, and their eggs are harvested and eaten. And obviously, we've already talked about how threatened and endangered all 7 of our sea turtle species are, and what a danger it is for them to become a part of the human diet. Overfishing. So marine species, we do want you to know this, they are a renewable resource. Renewable resources means something that can be replenished, that we take some of it away, more of it will be there, as opposed to a non-renewable resource where once you take that thing, it's gone and is not replenished. So fish and these marine species can be replenished, right? They reproduce. Unfortunately, most of them do not reproduce at a speed fast enough to be able to keep up with the overfishing that we are participating in. So the sustainable yield, this is a term that we want you to know, it's the amount that can be caught and still maintain a constant population. So basically, within that species, how many babies are being produced in 1 year, that tells us how many full-grown adults we can take in 1 year. And so that keeps a steady cycle and a stable number for this species around the world. That is ideal. That the sustainable yield is what we want to try to figure out and be maintaining. Unfortunately, overfishing tends to be more the norm. So overfishing is when catch falls despite an increased fishing effort. At that point, overfishing has occurred. In other words, you're trying harder and harder, more time, more money, more resources being put into trying to catch a particular species, but you're catching less and less of it. At that point, that means that overfishing has taken place. Let's see. I'll keep on going here. If you get a chance to take a look at some of this, that's great. I'm going to focus on the parts that we need you to write for the sake of your notes. So a fishery is regarded as collapsed. A fishery is an area where a particular species is going to be fished. It is regarded as collapsed if the numbers fall to 10% of what the historic highs had been. Whatever the historic highs are, you get all the way down to just 10% of that within a given year or season, then that fishery is considered to be collapsed. It's estimated that 1/3 of our fisheries around the world are already collapsed. It's a really, really heartbreaking trend that does not appear to be slowing down and only getting worse. Habitat destruction is a problem. Trawling is a problem. We'll talk about that some, I believe, in our next lesson. So some of these things are going to continue to come up. And in realizing that we are overfishing and overutilizing these resources from the ocean, we want to try to manage these resources a little bit better. So a couple of the things that can maybe be done. Well, first off, we just want to note figuring out what your sustainable yield is very difficult to do. It's very, very difficult to calculate how many babies a species is going to have each year, right? There are a lot of factors that come into play, factors that we can't even always think of and come up with. So even knowing what our sustainable yield is to have a target to aim for is incredibly difficult. So that can make management really tough. But some of the things that are being done, or maybe probably not enough, that more needs to be done of these things to try to manage our resources, limiting the total catch, and then close the fishery. Once you get to that total catch, then you can't fish from that area anymore. Limiting the length of the fishing season, similar to what we do with turkey and deer and other things for hunting season. We have a limited season when you can go get it. Let's do that with certain species in the ocean. Limiting the areas that are open for fishing, having some areas that are marine reserves, that are genuinely protected even from fishing. Limiting the number of boats, the size and type of fishing gear, the size of the fish that's going to be caught, the catches that can be had per boat, kind of like we do with tags on land, whether it's alligators or deer. A lot of times, a lot of places or states have limits and only a number of tags that can be had. We have a similar concept for some fish might need to be done. And then keeping an eye on fishing methods as well. Some are more harmful than others. The ones, unfortunately, that are the most harmful also tend to be the most convenient. And so fishermen want to use those methods to help bring in more fish to make more money. But unfortunately, it's a lot of damage being done in the process. Again, more stuff that you can take a look at here. Good information, but not things that you need to know for the sake of your test. So I'm going to keep on going here. Aquaculture, we want you to be familiar with what this is. This is the application of farming techniques to growing and harvesting aquatic organisms. This can be done with lots of different organisms. We list a few here: milkfish, mullets, Atlantic salmon, seaweed, scallops, and a number of different things. Salmon are kind of a good example of this. When you think of a fish farm, think in terms of like a chicken farm. If you've ever seen an image of what a chicken farm looks like, with a kind of a large chicken house that they're all in, kind of crammed into one area, it's just a very similar idea with fish. You're farming fish all in a contained area, usually high numbers of fish within that area. There are good things and bad things about this. There are certainly some positives. There's an example of what this could look like. There are thousands and thousands of milkfish within this container here, but you can notice the kind of the different color slightly between this water and the water around it. It's because of all the fish that are there. One of the things, because of that high volume in a small area, one of the challenges that you get, disease and parasites can be high just because they're in such close proximity. Can be difficult farming open water species that can jump or are used to having a big area to swim in and are built to be like moving fast and that kind of thing. It can be hard to contain them and to keep them healthy. A couple of other big issues that they run into, maintaining the water quality is going to be difficult when you have that many fish all in the same area, all defecating. The water quality is not going to be great. And then some pollution from these farm ponds that will run off into nearby waters. So you have a lot of different problems that come up. Let's see, commerce, we'll mention recreation here. Pearls, shells, corals, and collectible kind of things are some resources that we harvest. To my knowledge, the harvesting of these things is, for the most part, not particularly harmful, other than obviously coral. That's a big one. In fact, in most places it is 100% outlawed to harvest coral. Let's see here, and then recreation and all kinds of diving and surfing and just all kinds of stuff that put us in the water. I love to be in the water. I love to be on the water any chance I get. But we have to be cautious of that impact that our actions have. Things like whale watching and dive tours, all kinds of ways that humans interact with the ocean in a kind of a tourism kind of sense. That can be really great and educational and wonderful experiences, but they need to be done the right way. And then our last slide here, we also have some non-living resources that get used, things like oil, natural gas, and methane, minerals, sand, gravel, that we use for a number of different purposes. And then a big one also is salt. So lots and lots of resources, lots of benefit that human beings are getting from the ocean, but we've got to do a little bit better job, a much better job of making sure that we're not just taking, but that we're also treating the ocean with respect and in a way that is going to be sustainable for generations to come. Most of what's happening right now is not sustainable for generations to come. There's 9.1. Peace.